Okay. So last week, I gave a kind of overview of the module in terms of what we'll cover, what's the assessment like at a quite high level, and the teaching plan. And so this week we'll actually started getting into the details. And as we mentioned the last week, and for the first part, and we'll focus on the front-end development, I will cover a particular module called the Vue. And then today, for this lecture, I will just to give you kind of feeling of what Vue is. We're going to each different parts of the Vue in much more detail later. And so I assume most of you would know JavaScript to some extent. And so I'm going to start with like a comparison between the Vue and the JavaScript. And first, so this module will use actually mostly using JavaScript, and not just front end, also back end as well, but using different libraries from the JavaScript. And so I assume you already learned some JavaScript in the second year web development module. And if you need a review or JavaScript is new to you, and there are many good books, and actually they are all free. And so the one I would recommend is called Eloquent JavaScript, and you can see a picture on the left. And there's a link there as well. So that goes to the web page, which is the third edition. So this is a free book, and you could buy a printed copy as well, but I think most people will be happy with just looking at. And this is quite good one and quite comprehensive. And the link to the third edition I just showed, and it covers the latest the ES6 or ES 2015 standard of JavaScript, the features we introduced, so that will be covered in there as well. So it's better. Yeah, so that's the thing, and you need to remember, if you're going to use any other books, it's also fine, and it's better if it covers the ES6 standard. So, and ideally it should be published after 2015, when was the standard was introduced. Okay, in terms of the, let me move away the Zoom control thing. I couldn't. Oh, I managed to do it now. Ooh. Why it's not? Okay, and for this particular module, we'll not cover JavaScript from the beginning, just as explained. So I assume you already have some background. Okay, and so instead, and in this week, we're going to use a to-do example, just as it give you a refresh or people new just to see briefly how JavaScript works. Obviously, if you have learned JavaScript before, this is definitely not cover everything. So you need to read a book, and the one that I recommend the one in the last slides. And so there will be some live coding sessions, and you're welcome to code along and ask any questions if you get stuck. And you probably get or see me get stuck as well. So I'm going to try to do live coding, not just a copy paste. It's just a very common part of the real coding, and it's never perfect. You always get problems. Okay, and this will be the kind of styles we have for all the following lectures. Some slides and some live coding. Sometimes the majority of the lecture will be the live coding. Okay, and then so I will also introduce some tools as we go along, like the develop. So today we're going to talk about the code editor a little bit, which is Visual Studio Code, and some of you might be using it. And we're going to talk about other things as well. For example, extension for Vue, and which allows you to debug it a bit better in the Chrome browser, in the Chrome browser. So we'll introduce these as we go along, as we need them. Okay, and so, and this is a tool called the Visual Studio Code. And okay, well, I choose this one and it's free and open source, and it's made by Microsoft, which actually changed quite a bit in the last several years. And so it's actually not that bad a company now. So it actually, for example, owns the GitHub, which we're going to be using in the module 2. And it's available on all operating systems, Windows, Mac, Linux, etc. And it's used by many professional developers. So the company actually use that as well. And so it's a good balance between the feature and size performance. And we're going to just do a very quick poll just to see currently what is the editor you're using. If you bear with me very quickly, I'm going to create one. Which do you... Make it multiple choice. Code. And sorry, can you see the options I'm creating now?
Yes.
Yes.
And what else should I include there?
WebStorm.
Okay, WebStorm. And
IntelliJ.
Is that Intelligent Eye or something? Is that?
IntelliJ and the J.
Intelligent.
No, IntelliJ. INTL and J. IntelliJ.
INTL.
INTEL.
Yeah.
Yeah, J.
Okay. I mean, you probably know what it means anyway.
And being sorry.
Okay, and there's Atom. Finally, maybe I'll.
Sorry. Yeah. It's sorry, it's INTELLI rather.
Okay.
INTL. Yeah, yes.
And being probably.
Okay, and so I'm gonna do the poll now. So just to get a quick feeling, and so you should see the poll. Yeah. I can see people voting already.
Okay, could we also have the code for the attendance as well, please?
That's in the chat. The attendance code is in the chat. If you scroll up a little bit, you should see.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Okay. I'll give you 10 more seconds or maybe 20 seconds and then we'll close. Now I have 45 people voted. Okay. Yeah, I think most of you already voted, so I'm going to stop there now. And so you should be able to see the results either on your screen, if I can move this thing to the shared screen. Why you just don't want to go there? Okay, anyway, and you should be able to see a screen now which is showing the results from polling. So almost 90% people using Vue Studio Code already. That's good to know. So probably you use that in the second year module or something already. So maybe that's why. And so I don't have to just try to get back to my lecture slides. Okay, and yeah, it's really good to see. So IntelliJ is also quite popular. I'm slightly surprised. So maybe that's a quite good one as well.
Yeah.
Okay, and so for this module, I'm gonna be using Visual Studio Code and exclusively and show you how to use it, maybe some of the extensions needed. And if you want to use a different editor, that's completely fine. There's no requirement to say which editor you have to use. But I really recommend you give your Studio and Code a try, and you probably would like it. And me personally actually tried everything on this slide, and then so initially I would recommend Sublime Text, and which I think is better than Notepad++. And these are the ones which are very small in terms of file size, but also in terms of the functionality is relatively small. But actually before that, lots of people would be using NetBeans and Eclipse, and for if they have a kind of learned the Java, these are kind of default ones. And these ones has lots of features, probably more than you ever need. And the downside is they're quite large in terms of they're slow to read, take more spaces, and not very responsive. And when you're using it, and also there's the Atom, which is similar. It's a little bit smaller size compared to these. I think this is developed by the GitHub, and it's also quite good. And finally, I kind of settled on Visual Studio Code, and it has a similar set of rich features compared to this one, but much smaller than these. I think, unfortunately, over the years, the Visual Studio itself is actually getting bigger as well, and kind of moving towards that side, which is not ideal. And the other things that I also recommended before is brackets, which is very much designed only for web development, because many of the others are general ones. You can do multiple languages. But certainly Visual Studio, I think it's better than bracket, which is actually not small, and also lack of many of the features Visual Studio have. Yeah. And as I said, today we're going to go through a very simple to-do app as a refresh for JavaScript, but also get you a feeling of how would you implement that in Vue, what the Vue code would look like. And okay, and so in terms of function-wise, so you would have a title. Essentially, this is a web page. You have a title and a field, a button, and this is an unordered list. And you can add things or add new tasks to your to-do list. And by typing something and click the add button, and once you add, that item should go display here. And so we won't have any say saved function or anything like that. So once you're refreshed, the entire page will back to what it started like. Okay, as I said, so the goal is just to do a quick review of JavaScript, and then we will implement the same to do in exactly the same to do in Vue, and then just you can see the difference between these two languages. Okay, so this will comes the live coding part. So let me switch. Okay. Let me switch to. Oh. I need to find the files on my computer. Demo. Okay. Okay. Yeah. So I'm gonna keep the files up there because we need to show the what it looks like in the browser as we code as well. So we start with a new file, and so this is what do you look like on what Visual Studio Code would look like. And so this is called Vue.html. Okay, and so can you see the text on my screen, or is it too small?
Yeah, you can see. I can see.
I'll make it slightly bigger in case you can't. Okay, and so the first thing, a small trick in Visual Studio Code, because it supports something called the Emmet, so which allows you to, not this one, yeah, allows you to type something, save you a lot of typing. So it means you can type much less, and so there's some documentation in terms to this should be something like a abbreviation. Yeah. Okay. So it's not ideal, but it shows here. So instead of typing all these things, and you can just type this command, and this kind of support is built in. So it's actually quite easy to do. So one of the easy thing is you can use exclamation mark, and you can recognize, and you can see here, it recognizes this is an Emmet abbreviation. So that's like a one with the code it understands, and you press tab. So it generates these like the common headings you almost always need to type for every HTML file. And then here, I'll just say, the only thing I'm going to change here is to say to do. And then, so that's our file. And then, so there's one of the things you will do a lot is you want to see the code you create in the browser and as your code, and so you'll see if it's working. And there's lots of extensions that you can use to do that. And the one I used to recommend, and it's called Live Server. Okay, and this is still a good one. You can see. Okay, so that's the other thing. So if you click on this tab or icons on the left-hand side, it goes to this thing called extension, and which is additional functions you can install and add to your Visual Studio Code. For example, if you want to see live changes in the browser of your code, that will be a good thing to do. So this is the one I used to recommend, which is called the Live Server, and it has been downloaded 15 million times and has 4.5-star ratings. That's quite good. And instead, I'm currently using, again, the one I'm using now is just called Live Preview. I still installed it. Yeah, just disabled. Okay. And the reason is, this one is actually developed by Microsoft itself, who created the Visual Studio Code, and it's actually quite good. I think it's a bit smaller. It's very new, and so you can see it's 0.2.9, so it's very new. As actually says the preview state. I think good thing is you can do a preview window inside the Visual Studio Code as well. So you have the options to show outside or inside. So this is what we're going to see. So if you want to, I'm going to close this side. Okay, and so that's the other thing you should know about Visual Studio Code is this shortcut key. On the Mac is it's Command Shift P. On the Windows is Control Shift P, which shows you something like this. And then you can type any command you want. So for example, I want to preview, and then it will filter everything that's available, including the extensions. You can see there's these two options. You can live preview in the external browser or live preview in the internal browser. I'm going to using external browser most of the time, and just to say have a bigger editor space, but I'll just show you what internal looks like. So that's what the page looks like, and that's the to do. So in live preview, there are two options, and you can actually, oops, I forgot now. And there's two options, and you can ask you can have the web page refreshed, and every single time you type without saving. And so in my cases, I said you only change or update refresh after you say. So in this case, when I first type to do, this is not updated. But when I click Command S or Control S on your computer, it's saved. Now it updates. And that's a setting you can switch. And actually, yeah, it might be okay if I just stay with this. Okay, and go back to my lecture slides. And so we want to have something this. So we'll need a top, which is the my list. And that way I have an input field. And then we will, oh, I miss anything? No, not body. Input. Text. Okay, and so that should give me an input field, and then I'll have a button. Let's say, okay, I don't want type it, and I'll just do a button then, and it's called add. Okay, so that's this one here, and then I guess you can pre-populate a few tasks in your items. So put items in your task list or to-do list, which is what I will do here. Or you can just leave it empty, or even not even have a list at all, and you add that in your Vue Studio code. Also, in your JavaScript code. Yeah, and so, and in this one, actually, in the lecture slides example, actually had empty unordered list, but here, for example, I can use, just want to show you quickly the element. So I said I want an unordered list, and then inside it, I want to list items, and I want to 3 of these. I could also even put the text, what these 3 list items are, but I forgot how to do that. So I'm going to just do that now for the, yeah. So it will create an unordered list with 3 list items inside, and maybe I can do this now. So if you hold down Option key or Alt key on Windows, then you can have multiple cursors. So in this case, I have 3 cursors, and I can just type all 3 lines at the same time. Again, that's something you can do in Vue Studio Code. And 1, 2, and 3. Okay. So then you can see now, and this is what we can see. And in terms of looks, we almost have everything we need for the HTML part: title, input field, button, and unordered list. And obviously, if I type in something here and click add, nothing would happen yet. And this is what the JavaScript part comes in. Okay, so there's a few ways to add JavaScript to the HTML file, and you could add a script tag and say source equal to, say, my JavaScript something like that. Then you need to create a separate file, and which is called my.js, and it will be loaded. And today we're not going to do that. We're going to be even lazier. You can just including the code inside the HTML file, and by using the script tag. Okay, and so this is again a slight thing. So I put the script tag at the end of my HTML file inside body, and then if I need to reference to any of these HTML elements, and it will be already loaded by the time the browser gets to this part of the code. If I have this and at the beginning of my code, for example here, and I want to say, for example, document and dot get element by ID something something. And then the problem is, by the time it's running these JavaScript code, and this HTML part will not have been processed. So it will not be able to find the element you're referring to. Okay. That's quite common. That's why you see lots of the examples online to have a JavaScript at the very end. Okay, and so the idea would be, say, when user click this button, the add, so it have this event, when then triggered, and you want to get the text user typed in here, and then that text will be added to the list. The way to do that will be you're creating a new RI item, and then the new RI item, its content will be this. And then that item will be added to this unordered list. So that's that's the general idea. So first, we want to get, excuse me, get this button, and then say when this button is clicked, sorry, this button, and when it is clicked, it will do something will happen. So that's the event handler for this button. And let me see if I'm just try to be control space. Yeah. Okay. 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 I'm just stick with this. So I give this button a name. Ooh. Then can I use constant? I'll wrap the text so you can see. Okay, and so this is again something new in the ES6. And so previously you would always use var, which still works. And then in the ES6, and it give you two options. You can either use let, which defines a variable, which you can change values later on. And for example, if you know there's a number that's going to be changing values all the time, you should use that let. And the other one is called constant. And as it stands, as the names indicates, it's something once you assign the value, you can't change it anymore. And sometimes it's good because there's a value you know you're not going to change later, and you don't want it to be changed accidentally. So that's good to use. In this case, I want a reference to this button in my code. I know that's going to be just this button. I'm not going to using this variable to refer to anything else. So I'm going to refer to this button. Okay. But this doesn't mean, for example, you can't change the text or the button later on. That still can be changed. It just says this variable can't be to refer to a different button or some other values. That's not possible anymore. Still don't recognize it. Okay. And so what this line does is it will get a reference to this one button, and then we can attach to a event handler to the when it's clicked. Okay, and here there's other thing as mentioned, and previously as you taught, you probably always said you need to put a semicolon at the end of each line, but it's actually not required in JavaScript. So you can complete it will work completely fine if you don't have any things at the bottom of at the end of each line. So in this case, I'm not going to use semicolon, and it will still be able to do this and perfectly fine. Okay, this next part would be add the event handler. Actually, I forgot that now. Okay. Just that. Okay. So what you do is you then say add button dot. I'm just using the code from my example because I forgot this part a little bit now, how to do that in JavaScript. I'm using too much Vue. So that means when the click is happened, or the click event happens on this button, and I'm not sure if you even need to this. Okay. So what's happening here is essentially, defining an anonymous function, or in other words, a function without name. So what I'm typing there is the equivalent of this exactly. And that's again a new syntax called arrow function in ES6. You can just type this, which is completely fine. And you might have some variable as well. And then for the arrow function, it just says if you have a variable, it will be like this. It just remove the function keyword and you use this equal and greater than sign, which looks like arrow, and followed by a function. And in this case, we're not going to passing anything to the function, or just say this. That means when this button is clicked, we'll run this part. So what we need to do is get this one. Okay, and to get the value of this, then to do that, first we need to get to this element, which is this input field, and its ID would be called, let's say, new item text. Okay, can I do something similar here? And we'll do a constant new item text equal to document dot get element by ID, and the ID is the new item text. Okay, and so what I can then do is here. So when I click the button, I know that the text either typed in for a new item or new task should be stored in this one. So what I need to do after that is create a new list of items. Okay, so I have to do one more thing. Is I have to refer to this part, because this is where I'm going to insert my new task into. And so I will give this an ID as well. I'm going to call it to do list. So that's the actual list. Again, this is to do list equal to document dot get element by ID to do list. Okay. Let me see. So, what you will do is you will say to do list. So that will be this. which refers to this unordered list, dot append child, so that to add one more thing into the list. In this case, it has to be an RI element, otherwise it does not display properly because this is an unordered list. Okay. So to create a new new RI element, you say document dot create element. I think it's by ID. Create element, right? Huh? Dot create. Just create element. And then you say the element you want to create. In this case, we will say the element we want to create is list item. So just type RI there. If you want to create a paragraph, you type in P, and if you want to create heading, you type H1. Yeah. So we just want RI. And then I think it's called inner text. So I want the text of this RI, so will be, let me see if it's corrected to, wait, I'm trying to put everything in one line code. It might be a little bit too much. So I want the text of this item to be whatever I typed in this field, and which will be the new text item. And the only thing is, sorry, new item text. And the only thing you need to remember is this one actually refers to the text field. And you need to get the values entered inside text field. Okay. And so hopefully that should work. So I save it now. That's all you need. If it doesn't, we might need to break it down or just check what the error is. So if I type in something, I click add, oops, nothing happens. So this is when you need to open the console or the developer tools. I'm not even sure you can do, yeah, I can open dev tools panels. That's outside now. Yeah, and so I'm not sure if you can read the text. I'll make it bigger. So this, I think, is something not to do with the. Those are the things not to do. The first two errors, like this one, extension host, activating extension, view beautify, not to do with this. And the one error here is actually here. And it says document.create element.inText is not a function. So because I actually don't remember exactly how to set the inner text. And the inner text is actually an attribute. And so as you can see in my previous code, you would say this thing dot inner text equal to the task field of value, which is the value entered here. Does anyone remember the function actually to set the text?
You could probably use a template string.
Template string?
Yeah.
But then I think you still have to, I'm not sure you can use template string. No.
This is how I did it.
No, I think let me see. template string. Okay, okay, yeah. I'm sure there is a function which allows you to the list. Yeah, I'm sure there's
I think the inner text is, you could probably say equals and then new items that value instead of like wrapping it.
I doubt. I could try. Okay, so that's my first thought, but I probably don't think that. I think let's try again. Can clear these out. Yep. Let me just quickly HTML. No, it's the JavaScript set element. Okay, I think that's it. Yeah. It's still the common ones. I think the function. Okay, so jQuery has a text. I don't want jQuery. Okay. Didn't happen. So I'm gonna just follow the ones then in my lecture then, and without wasting too much time. So I would do is okay, I will do constant and new item equal to document. Okay, so that will be the new item. Then the new item dot in the text will equal to this. I should use this whole thing. And so this line would add the new item text, the value, and make it the text inside this new item, which is the list item. So that's what be the things in between the li, beginning and the closing tags. And finally, the to-do list, which is this thing, we can add this new item to it. Okay, and so hopefully this time it should work. Ah, still not. So I'm still missing something.
The list items, you have choose two different apostrophe and the
And which line of the code?
25.
25. Document.create. You mean here?
Yeah.
I think that's just a comma. Sorry, a single quote.
Yeah, single quote and double quote was, or I can't see it very clearly.
So you think it should not be single quote, or?
I thought two different things. I don't know, it's not clear for me.
Oh, you mean the two quotes are different symbols?
Yeah.
I think it both are single quote. I think that part should be fine. So the error says append child on node parameter 1 is not of type node. So what it's saying is this one, the new item, you think it's a not HTML element, so it can't insert to it.
Could it be that you set it as a constant new item and you're trying to set it to something else?
I doubt. I could change it to let, so it's something you can allow you to change. Probably likely to get. Oh, really? Okay. Let me.
I think we try inner HTML instead of inner text. Maybe that one. So line 26, new item for inner text. Can you switch to inner HTML?
Yeah.
Now we have it. Yeah, inner HTML.
Yeah. So I'm gonna explain that in a second. Okay. And so yeah. So maybe this is the example, the difference between the first here. So that previously I just used the constant. So that means it does not allow you to change anymore, even it's what not saying in the error message. And because once you set this one, this part actually try to change the value of new item. This actually try to change the values of the text inside here, and then it was allowed. I think that's what's causing the error. So once you change this to let, which is something you can change, and that's why here it worked. Okay, there's other questions. So here is inner text or inner. The other one is HTML. Yeah. And the difference is if you use this, it will treat what you type in here as HTML code. Okay, so if I type in EM new item, so here the EM will be treated as HTML command. So when I click add, you're supposed to see something which says new item, but it's italic because EM will be, you can see that's why it's here. Okay. Yeah. And when you use text, so lazy now, can't type. And if I do the same thing, EM new item, and then the whole thing will be just treated as plain text. Okay, and then it really depends on you which one is what you want, and usually it's safer to use inner HTML, because if you're using inner HTML, it will treat this as HTML command, and people can potentially put a script, some code in here. Oops. Malicious code. And this code will be run. Whatever they type in will be run on your computer, might take over control, etc., etc. Yeah. So usually text, then it will not run. It's relatively safer. And if it's into HTML, it will try to run the code. Here is your text. That's correct. That's fine. Yeah. Okay. So I guess so. That's it in terms of giving a feeling of how do you do this in JavaScript. So that's the old way. And then you will see later on when we're using Vue, it's very similar. And it's just a little bit easier, but you have to use some of these Vue syntaxes. The overhead will be, you need a little bit of extra setup for the Vue part. But once that is done, especially when the code gets more complex, and that will be easier. So let's get back to this part. Okay, and then we now move on to this Vue version, just to get the feeling. Again, as I mentioned, we're not going to cover the specific details about each part of the Vue, what those are for, and how to do that in much detail today. And just to see how the code would look like. We'll cover each part in more details in the next 2 or 3 lectures. As I said, even if it does not fully make sense, that's fine. We'll cover them later. Okay, and so so that will be the code. I'm not going to make it smaller because there's quite a bit of code already. And so the first thing, in terms of changing, first we need to do this. And so Vue is a library. And so you need to load the library before it can use any of the functions defined in there. So you have to load the file. And so you could load the file by, say, saving a local file on your computer and load every time. And what I'm using here is just loading the Vue library file, which is stored on the website, which is usually called a CDN. Oops, something is happening. And yeah, just this on this server, and then you can just use the Vue files that way. So then you don't need a local file, so long as that server is available or online and your computer is online, it can get the Vue files from there. So that's the first. Wow, I've got this again. That's weird. Okay, and then if we look at this part of the code, and you need a div and has an ID. So this is where the kind of, they call it the mount point for the Vue app. So basically where all these Vue code will apply to. So you can have several Vue apps in your code, and you can say the first part of the code, this Vue app is for this part of the page, and the second part is for different part of the page. And you need to define the bound point. And usually it's a div, and when it's have ID, then you can reference it later here. Okay, so it says the EL stands for element, and then the hashtag app just means I want to attach to an element, which is ID. The hashtag means the ID. ID is called app. That is. Okay, and then this is similar to what we have done. So you have the H1 heading, and you had the input field. Okay, and then the difference here is previously, or if we look at our code here, and you can see the input would say type equal to text and give a name and ID, something like this. Okay, and this is not necessary in the Vue version. So what we do is to say vModel equal to new task. So vModel, just as many other commands you will see from Vue command, is you always start with v dash something. And then what it says is I'm gonna link this input field, what is vModel does, I'm gonna link that to new task. So new task is what I define here. So I have a data section. I can define different date variables here. I'm going to define something called new task, and currently it's empty. So when you link the input with this new task, and that means whenever you change, one of them changes, the other will change as well. So if user type in something in the input field, the value from the new task will automatically change. In the sense, the Vue code will automatically get the updated value of this input field. You don't have to do, say, do this again. So you say new item text equal to this, and then when you run, you try to get the text and then the new item text dot value. You don't have to do this because it's automatically linked. New task always has the latest value. And this kind of link is actually two-way. So if you change in your code what this new task value is in the Vue code, and it will update the web page as well. So if in the code you set the new task value to something else, for example, if it does not start with empty, for example, and then the input field will start with some default values as well. So it's two-way. Okay, and next, okay, so this is a bit different. And so this is meant to be the button. Here we're just using button, and here to use input type or equal to button, and to give you a button. And the only difference is here. And again, you can see this says Vue, so that's one of the Vue command it introduced. And eventually, and this is the same as your event handler here. Yeah. So what this means is, say, Vue means event handler, and click is the event. So that says when click happens, we're gonna run this called add item. Okay, and then in your Vue, you have a section called the methods. You actually define what add item is. Okay, so here the steps inside add item is very similar to what you do here. And so you create a new RI element, and you made that text equal to the app.newTask. Okay, so the app here is this app here, which is the name you're given to this Vue instance. And then you can reference to everything defined in the data part using app.newTask. And sometimes you can also use this .newTask as well, but that part is a bit tricky. And because the this changes, the keyword this changes in the context, depends on where in the code that will changes. So only when it refers to the Vue instance that will work, but app.task would always work. And then document.getElement and by ID, task list, that's this one here. Just let to there, get this element, and then append child, new item. So this new item is defined here, it's new RI element. Okay, and so these lines, which is very similar to what we did before. And the difference again here, it says app.newTask equal to empty. Okay, so this is what happens because once you typed in something in the text field and that's get added to the list, and it does not automatically reset the values of the field. So app.newTask will equal to whatever you typed in before the user typed in the field. And as we said, and there's a two-way binding between the new task and the input field. And so in the input field, it will still see the text user typed in before. And sometimes this is what you want, but other times if you don't want, you to manually reset it to clear what the user typed in. Okay. Okay, now we're gonna give it a go here. So I'm gonna create a new file. I'm gonna save it. This time I'm gonna call it to do Vue. This is our Vue version. Let's do the same. If I just use exclamation mark, and then just click the tab key. It gives it this. Let's give you to do. Okay. And let's do the same. What it should be called, like, or what it should look like. Okay, and so we would have this heading, which is called my to-do list, and I can still use my live preview. Okay, I think the internal is enough for today, nothing too complex. Okay, and if you remember in the code, we're gonna, yes, and the first thing I forgot to do is to load the Vue library. So that's the external one. You have to copy paste on pkg.com/vue. Because if you don't have that, you're gonna have errors later on. Try to use any functions. Okay, and the first input the field, again, we don't need to type anything here. All we need to just say v model equal to, okay, it's called new task. I'll just stick with the same name. Okay, and then we have input button. Yeah. Okay, so this is another input type is a button. We don't need the value here, but I'm gonna say v on. That means the event handler, when it's clicked, we're gonna run something called add item. Okay, yeah, and so unorder the list with ID called task list. Okay, or just, okay, so this is still like an Emmet abbreviation. So I said I want to have an unordered list whose ID equal to task list, and hopefully, yeah. So I'm not gonna create any preload anything now, and so that's what it looks like. And if I save the file, you have the field and the button. Let's see, and if we have any errors. Okay, no errors. I'm surprised. And because I haven't defined any of these and Vue variables or function yet, it's not giving me any errors. Okay, and so that's all the HTML part. And what I then need to do is actually the Vue JavaScript code. Okay, I'll say let app equal to new. Okay, so let app equal to, and that part is not absolutely necessary. And I did this because later on I want to reference using a variable name to the element inside the data. And you can just say new view. That's also completely fine, and it will be valid. And it just says it's not easy way to reference to or refer to this instance later. You can only use inside, you can only use this, but it doesn't always work, can be quite tricky. Okay, and okay, so that's the other thing. So obviously this code looks quite complicated. Yeah, but essentially all you're doing is they're all between a pair of curly brackets, and so they are just a JSON object. And just so as a JSON object, you have the key and values. So essentially they are key value pairs. So you should have a key and then a value. And this should end with a comma. And then will be key 2, value 2, etc., and goes on. Yeah. And in our cases, there's some predefined keys. And the first one is called EL. And it will understand, so that stands for element is where the view code will be mounted. And in our case, we're going to say hashtag app, which I didn't do. So I need to do it here. Div ID app. So I'm going to put all these codes inside this pair of div tags. So they belong, so that these were, so this is the point where the Vue.js code will be applied and applied to everything inside, because I call this app. Okay, and the other thing you should do is always format your code to align them properly. For example, all these codes should be one step in, and you can do this manually, or you can ask Vue Studio Code do it for you. Use format document, and it should do the indentation correctly. Now you can see that's, yeah, that looks much nicer. Okay, as I said, these are essentially key value pairs inside a JSON object. Okay, so that's the first one, which is where the mounting point. And the second one is data. Again, this is predefined. You can have multiple kind of variables to store the data you need for Vue. In here, we can only have one new task, and it doesn't have any values. You can have more. You can also actually give it some value here as well. Let's say new task. And you can see here, and this task already get displayed in the field here. And because the V model here links this input field with the new task here. So whatever I typed in here, it will be here. So please enter a new task. And then that will get updated. And just to be aware, so this is actually not a prompt. So it will be the actual text if you leave it there. So by default, it's probably just leave it. Add item. Is that text equal to? What do I have to put it? Type equal to button. Huh? No.
Oh, you can assign it as a value.
It's
I think.
value.
Value and then add.
Okay, yeah, much better. Why says it's red? Ah, somehow the div got deleted there. Okay, going on. Okay, so next one is method. Okay, so this is something, this is a third predefined key. And then after that, you can have the functions defined for, and then you can call. So in this case, we're going to define a function called add item. So this is going to define here, so it can be used when clicked. It will go add item. And the very important, this has to be plural form. I always forgot S many times. Then you can say add item. So this is slightly and because this still essentially, this part is still essentially a JSON object. And so you can't say add items equal to, say, arrow function, etc., etc. You still have to say key value pair, and then followed by the actual function. I think previously here, if you use some arrow functions, it might cause error. So that's why you see in the code, I just use the old way to define function. And I think there's another way you can just say add item. That should work as well. So you can either use this syntax, function name, column followed by the code, or just say add items. Okay. So next one. Okay. So first we create element. So that's the same as before. It's no different. Create element. And then we're gonna have the new item dot in the text, and we explain the difference between the text and HTML equal to app dot new task. We can use app here because we give it a name, and we can see, for example, if I just do this, and you might be able to get this new task. It might also give you error sometimes. We can try. Let's leave this for now. So we created the list, sorry, create the item, and we add text to next one will be document get element by ID. Okay, so this is called a task list. So that's our unordered list here, and then append child. That's the same as before, and we can add a new item. Okay, so if I type in something, so as you can see, it's working now. So in this case, that works. Let's see if there's any error in the developer console. Okay, it's all happy. And then you can see a little bit extra information. Then you know it's running in Vue. For example, it says, and download Vue tools extensions for a better experience. I'm going to cover that next week. And then you know it's running in the Vue, and they say you are running Vue in the development mode, etc., etc. So, okay, this is just information telling you that we are using Vue and it's working fine. Okay, and that's only one last thing is say here, because we didn't have this line, and so the text is actually not covered, not cleared every time after you. And there's other thing you could potentially do is say you can manually change this value manually change this value inside the Vue instance, and the text here would change as well. Okay, so this is the console, and because this is basically just normal JavaScript, you can say app dot data it says app is not defined. Okay, so it is, of course. Yeah. Okay, and so we can't do that now. I thought we could, and we will have to do that later after we install the Vue extension. Then we will be able to reference. Yeah. The thing is, all these actually, when the Vue code is running, it will first convert all these Vue special command and these special structure to standard HTML JavaScript, and then that will be run. So that's why these things might not be there anymore. Okay, and we'll just, for completeness, I'll just say app dot new task. Oh, new task. Okay, so that will clear the fields after you type in something. Add, now it's cleared. We have something. Typing something else. Add, etc., etc. Okay. Yeah, we're almost at the end now. Okay, and they are not that different. And obviously, there's a little bit extra setup in Vue, but in terms of the actual function, mostly the how do I say? Let me close these ones. like these code, for example, the majority of the code is actually inside the function. This is called add items. And these other one is a bit different. It says add button dot unclick these ones, or this of code. And they are very similar between these two. Part of because Vue.js itself is a library. Later on, we're going to using the command line tools and using they call the single file component, which looks even more different. Okay, and so far, let's have a look. So this file has 36 lines of code. This one has 31. Yeah. So in this case, actually, this view is longer, but it's mostly because these extra setup. For example, you have to load this, you have to define, say, element, data, methods, these lines, which you don't need before. But these are just one-off, and later on, when code gets longer, it will certainly show its benefit. For example, and if you want to get the value from an input field, now it's much easier. And previously, you have to you have the input, and then you have to get this line, and then you have to use this line to get the value. Now you don't need, you just need to define a V model, and that value will always be stored inside the new task. You don't have to do anything. And then other convenience. And similarly, so here, the V on click equal to add item. Again, currently it doesn't have any clear advantage yet, but certainly will do later when it's apps get more complex. Okay, I think we almost at the end now. Yeah, and so this is the textbook we recommended for Vue part. Actually, also some of the last part as well is a textbook called Vue.js in Action. That is available, should be available on the module reading list. The information will be there. So that's the module page. And if you go to the module reading list, so that should be the first one. Okay, yeah. And so unfortunately, this one is not available online. So each of you should be eligible to receive a hard copy of the book. And all you need to do is to fill out an online form. And so if you haven't done that, just go check your university email addresses. And I might do that in the next lecture as well, if I found the link of the online form. So you just need to fill out your, like the home address, so you can send the book to. That's only the form 4. Okay, and for today, there's other things. So for this book, it has a GitHub repository, and that's like a companion repository for the book, and it's including all the code examples and from the book. So today we used chapter 1. It's a bit different. Yeah, today the examples is not from the book, so you wouldn't see that. And instead, the book has a calculator version, so it's much longer. And so it's done it first using HTML, normal JavaScript, and then with the Vue. And you can see all this from the companion website. Okay, and so for today, in terms of reading, it's just the first chapter of the book and introducing Vue.js. Okay, and that's it. Yeah. Yeah, so in the book, it uses a more complex example of calculator, and you can see the code in the online GitHub repository and also in the code.